So we've done some searching of the corpus. We've done some manipulation of the sentences that instantiate our lexical unit, or at least the word we think is going to be a lexical unit in the frame that we're characterizing. And what I'm going to show you in the next couple or three slides are some examples of what we found and what we noticed and what we know we will have to take into consideration when we define our frame and when we think about the frame elements and the syntactic form of the constituents that those frame elements occur in. Okay, so one thing we notice is that a prepositional phrase beginning with the preposition to occurs following the verb tie, as in, he was tied to the back of a horse. He tied the reins to a handy bush. By the way, the sentences that I'm showing you here are actual sentences from the corpus, among which are sentences that you can see annotated if you go to the FrameNet public website and LU, or search for that frame and look more carefully at the frame. Okay, so we've noticed that a prepositional phrase headed by the preposition to figures in. Okay, we also noticed that an object used for tying occurs in a prepositional phrase that begins with the preposition with. I tied them together with a rope. They tied his ankles with a thick cord, right? Both of those examples being instances of what we call symmetric tying. And the first sentence, he tied the driving wheel to Pete's cardboard box with string, another example of an object in a prepositional phrase beginning with the preposition with occurs, but an example of asymmetric tying. Okay, so this type of information that we surmised, that we learned about, not only from thinking about it before we looked at the corpus, but from seeing the data in the corpus, we use later on to create what we call subcorpora for annotation. Okay, the FrameNet editor allows FrameNet lexicographers to write a definition of the frame, to define frame elements using another tool within the FrameNet desktop, which we call the frame element editor, and provide typical examples, canonical examples, as well as to add lexical units using the lexical unit editor. And I have a picture of what that looks like here. I know the print is very small, but the key things that I want to point out here are where the FrameNet lexicographer writes the definition, you see that arrow, and where the FrameNet lexicographer inputs frame element names. This is the frame element editor. The lexicographer creates a name, writes the frame element definition in that space there, and chooses a color. Now, that may seem not very important, but in fact, it's very important for a number of reasons. We want to have different colors for different frame elements, because otherwise, when you look at a set of annotated sentences, you're not going to be able to see the different frame elements. And the whole point of the colors is to distinguish different constituents that instantiate different frame elements. And you also want to make sure that the color you use is going to provide sufficient contrast to actually show up well on the web, because all of FrameNet's reports are web-based. Okay? This is a view of the lexical unit editor. And here you see where the lexical unit name is added, where the lexicographer chooses the part of speech, where you see the arrow from part of speech, that's a little drop-down menu, where where a lexicographer writes a sentence description. In the early days, we used an online dictionary for informal sentence descriptions, or if for whatever reason, we used the Collins-Oxford Dictionary, right, Collins-Oxford Dictionary, to which we had access because of our affiliation with Sue Atkins, who served as the consulting lexicographer to the project in the first 5 or 6 years of the project. And if for whatever reason the dictionary didn't have a description that was appropriate for the LU, for the lexical unit, under consideration, a FrameNet lexicographer wrote a description. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks. That might seem like a detail that you don't need to know. It actually is quite important because of the way the way print dictionaries are created. We all know that what limits the size of a print dictionary, what limits the number of senses characterized in a print dictionary is the amount of money that the publisher wants to spend on that dictionary, and the amount of money that the publisher believes people will pay for a dictionary of the sort that they are producing. that translates into not actually having every sense of every word in a dictionary. And FrameNet's work is about defining every sense of every word, independent of external factors. I mean, that's the long-term goal, obviously. And then there's a way to input the word forms of that lexical unit. Then there's a subcorporation page. So within the FrameNet desktop, the lexicographer will specify different characteristics that the software will use to pull out likely good examples of this lexical unit in this frame. And for the most part, because software and computers are only as clever as them is, this is more or less limited to syntactic searches. Every so often, well, more than every so often, as linguists, as analysts of language, as semanticists, we have an advanced idea of what the collocates of a particular word sense are going to be. So we know what we can ask the software to eliminate. So what we might throw away, what we might ask them to make a point of including. In our example of attaching with the verb tie, syntactically we know we want to ask for with prepositional phrases and to prepositional phrases. We also know that likely nouns in the prepositional phrase that begins with the preposition with are going to be rope-like things. So we can specify rope and string and chain objects in the world that we know are going to, right? Then we're going to get our good examples, right? And doing what we call lexicographic annotation, we're looking for really good examples, canonical examples that illustrate that lemma in that frame. In the next picture is the FrameNet desktop for annotation, right? In the leftmost column, you see a list of the subcorpora that the software has extracted from the corpus and has been imported into the desktop. The lexicographer clicks on one of those little rectangular looking things, and then the software opens up that set of sentences and displays them in the top right window. And I've chosen the keyword in context display of the sentences, so you see how that's analogous to what we saw in the XQuick search tool. I then, as the FrameNet lexicographer annotator, choose a sentence from among that list that I see in the top right window. So I click on that sentence, it becomes highlighted in the top right window, and it appears in this middle window pane. right? The one with the colors, the print of which is too tiny to see, but you'll see it when you look at the slides closely after they're on the course website. My job as annotator is to choose the frame element that matches the constituent, right? So the sentence that appears here is, he tied the reins to a handy bush and followed the sound of something. The part of the sentence that I'm going to annotate is, he tied the reins to a handy bush. And I select agent for he. I select item for the reins, and landmark for to a handy bush. The software includes a classification operation, automatic classification. That's what provides the best guess that the software can give us for the phrase type and grammatical function. Part of my job as a lexicographer, as an annotator doing this work, is to check that what the classifier provided is actually true, is correct. If it's not correct, I change it. If it is correct, obviously, then I go on to the next sentence that I'm going to annotate. So the next slide shows you many of these, right? I've annotated many sentences in this subcorpus, as well as many sentences in the different subcorpora of this lexical unit. This is a view of the annotation layer. So on the far left of the bottom pane, you see the list of possible frame elements. And you see in the middle pane the annotation workspace that I talked about just before this, and the annotated sentence. In the next view, you see the sentence highlighted, the healer of a different sentence. The healer would tie a black thread round the horse's ankle. And you see that this is not the quick view that I started with. This is what we call the sentence view. The lexical unit under consideration is highlighted with a black background and white font. And again, the frame elements, the grammatical functions, and the phrase types for each frame element are viewable. Here I've highlighted the grammatical function layer, right? And here you see the phrase type layer with a full list of phrase types in the bottommost pane of the picture. So, FrameNet is unique. It instantiates frame semantics. It provides semantic annotations and syntagmatic information. Frame elements, grammatical function, and phrase type. The mapping between the meaning and the form. So, for your assignment tonight, I want you to look at, this assumes that everybody has internet access, yes? I want you to look at the attaching frame, choose a lexical unit other than tie, and come to class prepared to talk about the valence description of the lexical unit that you've chosen. Doing that will require that you become really familiar with the frame elements, example annotations, and how they all come together in the valence description of the lexical unit that you've chosen. I'm asking you to do this also so that you become familiar with looking at, so that you gain experience with looking at FrameNet data. Any questions? Questions? Questions about the assignment? Questions about the reading? I think we're going to have you choose an English word. You may choose, if necessary. You may end up talking about it in Portuguese. But FrameNet data is English. So you're going to be looking at an English word. You might also, for your own interest and for further down the line, think about the analogous word, a comparable word in Portuguese, and think about whether its valence description would be the same or different from the English. Okay, so remember, tomorrow you will have finished the article on attaching. You will have thought about a lexical unit in the frame attaching from the web reports available on the website, or available from the website. And you will, I hope, come with questions about the material that you have read for today and tomorrow. Okay? Thank you.